My aunt's voice was a thread of sound, barely there in the stifling heat of the kitchen. "You can't go out tonight, Jake. Not on the 19th. The mountain doesn't like it." I just waved her off. "I just need a little bourbon, Auntie." "The liquor store on Highway 12 inches. It's closed," she cut in, her voice cracking with an urgency that startled me. Her deep-set eyes bored into mine. "Closed for a long time. Like everything else in this godforsaken valley. Stay here. For me." But I couldn't. The four walls of my childhood home were closing in, the air thick with the smell of cough medicine and a mountain of regrets. I snatched my keys from the hook. Caroline reached out, a flicker of emotion, as if to stop me, but her hand fell back to her side, a gesture of painful resignation. She knew. She already knew there was no stopping what was meant to be. The night air hit me like a damp, heavy blanket. The Appalachian range that cradled our valley didn't look like sleeping giants tonight. They looked like silent mourners at a funeral. The town was utterly dead. Not a single cricket chirped. Not a dog barked. Just a deep, oppressive silence, the kind that feels like cotton stuffed in your ears. When I turned the key, my old truck's engine roared to life, shattering the quiet with a brutish violence that felt like a sacrilege. Highway 12 stretched out before me, a cracked ribbon of asphalt swallowed by the blackness of the pines on either side. My headlights could only carve a small, wavering tunnel through the suffocating dark. And then I saw him, a figure staggering at the very edge of the light. He wore filthy work clothes and dragged one leg in a painful limp. Hemlock Peterson. My heart hammered against my ribs. Hemlock died in that mine collapse years ago. I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding on loose gravel. I whipped my head around to look in the rearview mirror. The road was empty. "Just your imagination," I muttered, my voice sounding small in the cab. But a cold dread snaked down my spine. Hemlock wasn't heading into town. He was going up the mountain, toward Black Rock Mine. I tried to shake the image from my mind and pushed the accelerator. A few miles down the road, something flickered ahead. A sickly, blinking red neon sign. Waltz, gas and liquor. It was lit, but Caroline had sworn it was closed. I pulled into the overgrown parking lot, the tires crunching on gravel and weeds. A foul stench immediately hit me, sulfur, mixed with something decaying, like wet clay from a freshly dug grave. The front door of the store was ajar, and it creaked open as I pushed it. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the sharp tang of old vinegar. That red neon light bathed everything in a gruesome, dried blood hue. The shelves were still stocked, but everything was coated in a thick, grayish film. Cereal boxes bulged unnaturally, and beer cans were warped and twisted. I walked cautiously toward the counter. Pinned to an old corkboard was a calendar. It was from 10 years ago, October. The 19th was circled in red ink. Beside it, a yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline screamed at me, "Black Rock Mine Disaster. 12 dead." And below it, in much smaller print, "Manager Jacob Harris denies responsibility. My name." A rustling sound came from the back of the store. I stumbled backward, crashing into a shelf. Bottles tumbled and shattered, releasing the stench of cheap, sour liquor. That was it. I bolted, bursting out into the night air and leaping into the truck, fumbling to lock the door. My hands shook so badly, I could barely get the key into the ignition. I turned it. A cold, dead click. Nothing. And then I saw him, standing at the edge of the parking lot, just outside the reach of my headlights. A figure in a heavy miner's jacket, which seemed oddly thick for such a warm night. His face was lost in the shadows beneath a helmet. Something black, wet, and viscous dripped from his sleeves, splattering onto the gravel below. I screamed, a raw, ragged sound, twisting the key again and again. Click, click. Then, with a shudder, the engine roared to life. I slammed the truck into gear and stomped on the gas. The wheels spun wildly before gripping the asphalt, and I sped away, leaving the red glow of Waltz behind me. I just had to get back to my aunt's house, back to safety. But the road, it was changing. The smooth asphalt had vanished, replaced by a rough, gravelly path. My heart sank into my stomach. I wasn't on Highway 12 anymore. This was the old service road, the road to Black Rock Mine. I tried to wrench the wheel to turn around, but the path was too narrow, flanked by steep, rocky inclines. The truck jolted to a violent halt, the engine dying with a final choked gasp. This time, I knew with chilling certainty it wouldn't start again. Silence fell, but it wasn't empty. It was a grotesque, living silence. The wind whistled through the rusted, skeletal frames of the abandoned mine equipment. And underneath that wind, I could hear it. Whispers, dozens of them, bitter and faint, their words just beyond comprehension. I stumbled out of the truck, my only thought to walk back, to run. But my feet didn't feel like my own. They were guided, pulling me forward. I stood before the mine entrance, a gaping black mouth in the side of the mountain. A rusted sign swayed in the wind, its words barely legible. Danger nitrogen monoxide entry. And they were there. Dozens of figures scattered among the ruins. They stood atop heaps of coal and among the skeletal remains of machinery. All silent, all with their backs turned to me, staring down into the pitch-dark throat of the mine. I took a step back, and my foot crushed a dry branch. Snap. The sound was like a gunshot in the dead quiet. The turning began. First, it was Hemlock, off in the distance, his neck twisted with a sickening wet crack. Then another figure turned, and another. And then all at once, in a silent, coordinated movement, their faces turned toward me. Pale, gaunt faces with eyes as blank and milky as marbles. I spun around to run, but the ground beneath my feet gave way. I plummeted into a pit, plunging into cold, viscous mud and coal slurry. A searing pain shot through my ankle. I struggled, trying to pull myself out, but the thick muck held me fast like wet concrete. And then, from beneath the surface, something grabbed my ankle. An ice-cold hand, gripping me with impossible strength. I screamed, looking down into the black ooze. A face emerged from the mud. Ben, my deputy, my closest friend. His eyes were blank, murky voids. "You can't run, Jake," his voice echoed, a hoarse, earthy sound that seemed to come from below the ground itself. A woman stepped out from the crowd of silent figures. Sarah, Ben's wife. She was still wearing the red dress she had on at that barbecue, the last time I saw her alive. "The pump," she hissed, steam escaping her lips with the words. "You knew it was broken. You let them drown. You let him die. I'm sorry." I cried out, hot tears mixing with the cold mud on my face. "Sorry isn't enough," she whispered, her voice a chilling breeze. "Tonight, the mountain will reclaim what is its own." The other figures began to move, sliding down the sides of the pit toward me, their pale, grimy hands reaching out. "You belong to us," Ben growled from below, his grip tightening. I thrashed in pure despair as their fingers clutched at my arms, my legs, pulling me down into the suffocating darkness. Just then, the first weak light of dawn began to break over the mountaintop, piercing the mist. The light touched them. They didn't vanish in a puff of smoke. They froze, like marionettes with their strings cut. Sarah looked up at the sun, a lifetime of grief etched into her frozen face, before she and the rest of them slowly receded back into the mine's eternal darkness. Ben's hand released my ankle. I scrambled out of the pit, limping, gasping, my body shaking uncontrollably. I ran all the way back to Caroline's house, collapsing onto her doorstep. She opened the door, and there was no surprise in her eyes, only a deep, piercing grief. "They found you," she whispered. I could only nod, speechless. "They always do," she said, her voice heavy with the weight of years. On the 19th, I dragged my battered body into the bathroom, desperate to wash away the mud, the stench, the memories. I stared into the mirror. My face was pale, scratched, and haunted. I looked down at my hands, scrubbing at the grime under my fingernails. And then I froze. It wasn't ordinary dirt. It was jet black coal, wet and glistening, as if freshly dug from the deepest part of the earth. I rubbed frantically, my skin turning raw, but it wouldn't come off. It was a curse, etched into my very flesh. I looked up at the mirror again, and for a terrifying split second, the eyes staring back at me were no longer my own. They were blank, murky, and full of accusation. And in that moment, I realized the truth. I would never leave this valley. I had belonged to this mountain all along. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next descent into the dark. Stay safe out there. The air was so thick you could choke on it, sticky against my skin like a film of sweat that just wouldn't dry. It was Oben Week, and the university dorm in Tokyo was almost completely empty. A silent, concrete island adrift in the sea of festival noise outside. My name's Kenji. I told my parents I had to work my part-time job, but that was a lie. The truth is, I just wanted to be here, to soak in the silence. But tonight, that silence shattered. Dome dot 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 dome dot dot. A dull, heavy thudding sound. It wasn't footsteps. It was like someone was dropping a wet sandbag on the floor, over and over again. It came from the hallway, and it sounded like it was right outside my door. I held my breath, listening. Even the cicadas outside seemed to fall silent. A faint, almost imaginary scent of incense wafted through the air, the kind people burn for the dead during Oben. My phone vibrated on the desk, a jarring buzz in the quiet room. It was a lying message. From Tanaka-san, the dorm manager. "Kenji-san, don't open your door. I'm checking on the noise. Stay inside." A chill crawled right down my spine. "Tanaka-san?" But ... He went back to his family in Nagano 3 days ago. I saw him leave. My hands trembled as I typed back. "You're still here, Tanaka-san?" No reply. The message didn't even show as read. And then the dome ... The hallway was dead quiet again. Another message buzzed on my screen. This one wasn't from Tanaka-san. It was from someone named Riku. "Don't trust Tanaka-san. That's not him. He's the one making the noise." My stomach flipped. My fingers flew across the screen. "Who are you?" The reply was almost instant. "Room 108. I'm watching him through the security camera feed on my laptop. He's on the 3rd floor, right outside your door." I slowly crept towards my door, my heart pounding in my ears. I leaned in, pressing my eye against the cold metal of the peephole. I scanned the hallway. It was empty. There was nothing but the dim, humming glow of the fluorescent lights and that lingering, cloying smell of incense. "No one's there," I texted Riku. His response came back immediately. "He moved. He knows you're watching." I flinched back from the door as if it were electrified. At that exact moment, the overhead light in the hall flickered erratically, and in that stuttering light, I saw it. A figure, tall and painfully thin, wearing a security guard's uniform. It was standing just around the corner of the stairwell, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, as if it were listening intently for something. My phone buzzed again. A message from Tanaka-san. "Kenji-san, are you all right? Please confirm you're in room 303. Before I could even think about what to do, another message from Riku flashed on the screen, this one in all caps. "Don't reply. He's trying to figure out which room you're in." My pulse was a drum beating against my throat. How could I trust this stranger? How do I know you're not lying, Riku? I typed, my thumbs fumbling. His answer made my blood run cold. Because I know you're in room 304 Haru's room. You told me you'd water his plants while he's gone for Oben. Remember? My heart just stopped. He was right. I wasn't in my room. 303. I'd been sleeping in 304 all week because my friend Haru's air conditioner worked better. RIKU ... This guy was real. With a new sense of dread, I moved to the door of room 304 and looked through its peephole. The angle was different. From here, I could see my own door, 303, directly across the hall. And then I saw him. A man or something shaped like one standing right in front of room 303. Tall, lanky, dressed in Tanaka-san's uniform. It slowly, mechanically lifted its head. Down. It slammed its body into my door. Down. It wasn't using its hands. It was using its forehead. Down, dot. Each impact was heavier than the last, a sickening sound of bone on wood echoing down the empty hall. Then it stopped. It pressed its face hard against the peephole of room 303, trying to peer inside into the empty room. It knew I wasn't there. And then it turned, slowly, deliberately. It turned its head until it was facing my direction. Facing room 304. Facing me. It stared straight at my door, straight at me. Guttural, inhuman roar ripped through the hall, followed by a violent explosion of sound. Bang, bang, bang! The door to Haru's room shook under the force of the blows. The doorknob twisted back and forth, rattling furiously. I screamed, stumbling backward and crashing into the desk, sending things scattering. My phone clattered to the floor. The screen lit up with one last message from Riku. He found me. He's outside my door. I'm sorry, Kenji. Then, another message popped up below it. From Tanaka-san. Found you, Kenji-san. And just like that, the rattling stopped. The pounding ceased. Silence descended once more, heavier and more terrifying than before. I held my breath, every muscle tensed. Sweat dripped from my forehead onto the tatami mat. Then a soft click, the sound of a key turning in the lock. I threw my entire body against the door, a useless, desperate gesture. It was too late. The door burst open. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable, for death. Nothing. Slowly, I opened my eyes. The hallway was empty. The weak fluorescent light flickered on. Business as usual. The smell of incense was gone. Outside, the cicadas started their deafening chorus again, their rhythm seeming to mock my terror. I shakily picked up my phone. No new messages. Riku? Are you okay? He's gone. I typed. No reply. I had to check. I had to know. I grabbed Haru's old baseball bat from his closet and stepped out into the hall. The air was hot, but it felt lighter now, no longer pressing down on me. It was just an empty, silent dorm. I made my way down the stairs, one careful, creaking step at a time, my knuckles white on the bat. The first-floor hallway stretched out before me, dim and quiet. Room 108, the door was slightly ajar. Riku? I whispered, my voice barely a crackle. I pushed the door open. The room was dark, coated in a fine layer of dust. I fumbled for the light switch and flicked it on. There was nothing. No laptop, no futon, no sign anyone had lived here recently. Only a wall calendar, the page still turned to August ... of last year. My heart started pounding against my ribs. No, that's not possible. I ran to the security office at the end of the hall. The monitors were all hissing with static. On the desk lay a thick, leather-bound duty logbook. I frantically flipped it open to the resident registry. Room 108, vacant. Room 303, Kanji Tanaka. Room 304, Haru Ito. Wait, Kenji Tanaka? My name is Kenji Suzuki, not Tanaka. I flipped toward the back of the book, to the incident reports. One entry was marked in stark red ink. August 13th, last year, 23 o'clock. Student Riku in room 108 reported an intruder. Security check found nothing. Student displayed signs of severe paranoia. Next morning, August 14th, Riku found deceased in his room, apparent suicide. My throat went completely dry. Riku, he was dead. He's been dead for a whole year. Then, who was I texting? Another report was logged right below it. Same date, August 14th, student Haru Ito, room 304, found murdered. Cause of death, blunt force trauma. Primary suspect, Kenji Tanaka, room 303, son of dorm manager Tanaka. Kenji ... Tanaka. I stared at the page, the words blurring. Suspect fled the scene. Last confirmed location, room 304. A horrifying realization dawned on me, so cold and sharp it stole my breath. I'm not Kenji Suzuki. I'm Kenji Tanaka, Tanaka-san. He's my father, and I've been hiding in Haru's room for a year. I stumbled backward, crashing into the bank of monitors. The static hissed louder, almost like it was laughing. Then, one of the screens flickered. The image sharpened, clearing to show a live feed of the hallway right outside the security office I was in. A tall figure stood there, its back to the camera. My figure, my clothes. Slowly, it began to turn around. It was me, but it wasn't me. Its eyes were just empty, black sockets. Its mouth was stretched wide in a silent scream far too wide to be human. It raised a hand, and it waved. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a deep, final vibration. I pulled it out with a hand that felt like it belonged to someone else. A new line message had appeared, from an account I'd blocked a year ago. From Haru. Found you, Kenji.
The sky over Mumbai darkened, heavy, like a drenched velvet blanket thrown across it. Then, as if guided by an unseen hand, the power snapped off. It wasn't just a blackout, it was a silence that swallowed every sound. Ceiling fans froze, TVs went dead, and the relentless noise of the crumbling Golmahar Haveli just stopped. I held my breath. The monsoon rain hammered the tin roof on my balcony, and below, the car horns vanished into the sticky, suffocating heat. The air inside my apartment, thickened instantly. Sweat trickled down my neck, mixing with the faint curry scent from my neighbor's kitchen. And then came the building's century-old mustinasta smell of damp walls, of time itself and untold stories that always made me feel trapped. I groped across the table, my hand brushing against my phone. The screen was black, the power bank dead. Perfect. Alone in the dark, with walls that seemed to breathe. And then it began. A cry. From apartment 4B, they'd moved in just 3 weeks ago. A young couple with a newborn. At first, the cry was weak, pitiful. Then it shredded into a sharp, piercing sound that cut right through the paper-thin walls. I closed my eyes, trying to endure it. Baby's cry. That's normal. But this cry, this wasn't like any babies I had heard before. It just stretched on. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. It wasn't a plea for comfort anymore. It had become mechanical. Relentless. Soulless. Like an ultrasonic drill boring into my skull. It never even paused for breath on Over Passade. I was sitting on the cold floor, hugging my knees, my shirt soaked with sweat, hands pressed tightly over my ears. The downpour outside couldn't drown it out. The cry was like a blunt dagger, stabbing over and over at my frayed nerves. Nausea was rising in my throat. Then the room filled with a scent of pungent jasmine, like flowers wilted from some ritual, mingled with a cloying, rotten sweetness, like decaying meat. I'd smelled it last week, but dismissed it, assuming it was just the wind. Suddenly, as abruptly as the power had cut out, the crying stopped. The silence that followed was worse, expectant, promising something far more terrible. I froze, my muscles taut. From the other side of the wall, a voice. MrSharmas.com, mechanical. She, Beta, Papa won't let you disturb them. Then, a soft, dull thud, like a small sack of rice being dropped on the floor. Primera Shra neck bake. No, it couldn't be. I was just scaring myself. Surely, he was just soothing the baby. Surely, I crawled to the front door, pressing my ear against the heavy wood. The hallway was dead silent. The whole heavily felt like a tomb. I peered through the peephole, fogged with moisture, and saw only a faint yellow glow from the emergency light down by the distant staircase. Primera Leia Ned Bach trying to breathe. The unease had solidified into a tangible, choking horror. Russell. Bare feet scraping against the dirty marble floor. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I peered through the peephole again, my heart pounding against my ribs. No one, just the empty hallway. But I had heard it. Oh God, somebody called the police. A voice shouted from the third floor. Mr. Bowmick from 3B, a cranky old widower. His voice trembled with pure fear. Did you hear that? Upstairs. Apartment 4B. I heard a woman scream. A horrible scream. Oh God, he's out! I stepped back, my hands clamped over my mouth. He heard it too. I wasn't going crazy. He's right outside. Mr. Bowmick yelled again, closer this time. I saw him come out. He's going up. The 4th floor. Lock your door. He's insane. Heavy, chaotic footsteps ran up the stairs. Thump, thump. The sounds reverberated in my chest. Then a violent bang shook my door. Anya, open the door. Let me in. It was Mr. Bowmick screaming. Right outside. He's here, in the hallway. Please. He saw me. I screamed, stumbling backward into a table. I stared at the door, shaking violently. Open its hand, maybe lead us both to death. Leave it closed and condemn him. I crawled to the peephole again, trembling. The hallway was empty. No Mr. Bowmick. No Mr. Sharma. Only darkness and that distant yellow glow. But the banging continued, and Mr. Bowmick's screams still pierced my ears, begging to get in. He's right behind me. Open the door. Then, I realized, the banging, the screaming, they weren't coming from outside. They were echoing inside my own head. I slid back into the living room, horrified. Was I losing my mind? The heat, the darkness, the crying. It was all breaking me. The door banging stopped. Silence returned, heavy and threatening. I curled into the darkest corner, trembling for what felt like an hour. I didn't dare move, just listening. Rain. A drip from the ceiling plopping into the bucket I had set out. Then, a new sound. From apartment 4C, across the hall, Rohan, the young musician, usually so noisy, his sitar wailing all day. But since the blackout, he had been silent. Now I heard him, a moan. Painful, choked, like someone trying to cry, but couldn't. Help me! A weak sound floated through the hallway, then a loud crash. Glass shattering. A heavy thud, then silence. I couldn't take it anymore. This wasn't a hallucination. A tragedy was unfolding, right here. Mr. Sharma in 4B, Mr. Bowmick in the hallway, and now Rohan in 4C. I was going to be next. Fear gave way to a cold despair. I had to know what I was facing. I had to see the truth. I stood up, my legs heavy as lead, crossing the dark living room, the smell of wilted jasmine suffocating me. I reached the door, inhaled deeply, and peered through the peephole one last time. The hallway remained dark. The emergency light seemed to have gone out. A shadow stood there. It was Mr. Sharma. From 4B he stood inches from my door. But he wasn't looking at me. His back trembled, hands clenched into fists. He was staring at Rohan's door, which was now completely silent. He wasn't a predator. He was prey, terrified. Then, in the deadly hallway silence, Mr. Sharma slowly turned. His face was in shadow, but his eyes were wide, stark white with sheer horror. His gaze pierced the fogged glass, locking onto mine. His lips moved. No sound came out, but I read every word, etched forever into my mind. It's not out here. Tears rolled down his cheeks. It's in there. It's in Foray. A cold draft brushed the back of my neck, carrying the stench of rotting jasmine. I realized then, it was all real. The crying baby. Sharma's whispers, Bomek's screams, Rohan's moans. They weren't echoes, they were a welcoming feast. I wanted to scream, but my throat was dry, voiceless. Slowly, I turned to face the darkness that reigned in my own apartment. This time, the whisper didn't come from the wall. It came from right behind me, a freezing breath on my skin. She? Thank you for joining me on this terrifying journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more chills. Stay safe, and see you next time.
The 7-day Labor Day holiday should have been the loudest time in Hillcrest Dormitory. Instead, it was dead silent. You could almost smell the quiet, a mix of dust, old peeling paint, and that damp, musty scent of empty hallways. My name is Alex Warner, a third-year dance student, and for tonight, I am the only living soul left in this historic 4-story building, all because of an audition. An audition I had won. My victory was tucked away in a small suitcase, which I was now dragging across the tiled lobby. The wheels made a jarring, bone-cracking sound that echoed like it was coming from a tomb. I got back just before 10, right as the dorm manager, Miss Harper, was locking the heavy iron gate. Her eyes landed on me, not with surprise, but with a deep, weary fatigue. She didn't even bother asking why I hadn't gone home for the holiday. "Lock your room. 204, she muttered, her voice as dry as sandpaper. The keys in her hand clattered softly, then faded into the darkness as the gate slammed shut with a solid, final cap. And just like that, I was officially trapped inside with my victory. The second-floor hallway was pitch black. The dorm's motion sensor lights were notoriously faulty. They only turned on when they felt like it. I stomped my foot down hard. Bam! The fluorescent lights flickered to life, casting my shadow long and distorted along the wall. It chased me step by step before fading away behind me, as if some invisible entity was swallowing the light whole. My room, 204, was at the very end of the hall. My roommate, Lily Chun, had gone home a week ago. I could still hear her sobbing from the night before she left, her words echoing in my mind. "Alex, you won. But don't you dare think you can enjoy it in peace." I shook my head, trying to push the memory away. I was completely exhausted. The feeling of sweat, stage makeup, and the lingering tension of the performance still clung to my skin like a second layer. I desperately needed a shower. I tossed my bag onto the bed. Inside, my small crystal trophy gave a single, faint sparkle before lying still in the darkness. Grabbing a towel, I stepped back out into the hall. The public bathroom was damp, the air thick with the smell of cheap bleach mingling with steam. I picked the farthest shower stall and turned on the hot water. Steam rose quickly, blurring everything into a hazy fog. I closed my eyes, shampooing my hair, and that's when I heard it. Click. A tiny but distinct sound. The latch on the neighboring stall had just clicked open. My heart skipped a beat. I immediately turned off the water. The steam lingered, but the silence that followed was ice cold. "Who's there?" My voice cracked, barely a whisper. No answer, just the sound of water dripping from my showerhead. Drip, drop. Like a countdown to disaster. I quickly wrapped a towel around myself and crept out of the stall. The sinks were empty. All the other stall doors were slightly ajar, exactly as they were when I first came in. It was probably just a rat. I tried to tell myself, even though I knew no rat could possibly reach a metal latch that high up. As I started heading back to my room, my eyes fell to the floor, and I froze. Tere. Tere. On the wet tile in front of the last stall, the one I thought the sound had come from, was a perfectly dry patch of floor, clearly imprinted with the shape of two bare footprints. It was as if someone had been standing there, motionless, watching me the entire time, and had only just left. I bolted to room 204, slammed the door shut, locked it, and threw the deadbolt. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I grabbed my phone and quickly texted my friend, Mia. "Hey, I'm really scared. I'm all alone here, and I just heard something in the bathroom. I think someone's in there with me." 5 agonizing minutes later, she replied, "Calm down. It's probably just the old pipes. Or a rat. Old buildings are like that. Just go to sleep. You'll be fine in the morning. And try not to dwell on Lily." Her message hit me like a hammer. I glanced over at Lily's empty desk. My trophy sat there, cold and still. A wave of guilt churned in my stomach. What had I done? I only competed, right? I didn't mean to hurt her. I clenched my fists, shutting down the thought. I deserved this. I turned off the main light, leaving only the small, warm glow of my desk lamp on. I climbed into bed, trying to lose myself in some videos to fall asleep. Outside, the silence hung heavy and suffocating, like a burial shroud. I was just starting to doze off when another soft click echoed through the room. I jolted upright. White light from the hallway was streaming through the vent above my door. The motion sensor lights had flickered on again, but there were no footsteps. Then, lop, cop, lop, cop, cop. The sound was coming from directly above me, the 3rd floor. It sounded like high heels, but the rhythm was all wrong. Lop, cop, lop, cop. One step was heavy, and the next was light and dragging, like someone was limping or maybe a heel was broken. Cold sweat ran down my neck. No way. This building was supposed to be empty. Lop, cop. Lop, cop. Lop, cop. The sound paced back and forth, gnawing at every last one of my frayed nerves. Trembling, I reached out and switched on the main neon wall light. Bright, sterile white light flooded the room. The footsteps stopped immediately. Silence fell once more, but it felt even heavier now. I sat frozen, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't dare turn off the light again. I hugged my knees, clutching my phone tightly. I played games, scrolled through social media, did anything I could to stay awake. But exhaustion eventually won. Around 2 in the morning, I nodded off, sitting upright. My phone slipped from my hand and fell to my feet, the room lights still blazing. I have no idea how long I was asleep. I woke to a bone-chilling cold. The room was pitch dark. The lights were off. I fumbled around for my phone. It was dead. The battery, which had been over 40%, was completely drained. And then I saw something that made my soul feel like it was leaving my body. The door, one ay hadlach, andlach, ay ha, lashdwa, now open. A black gap about the width of a hand revealed the dark hallway beyond. Thud, thud, thud. A terrifying explosion of sound erupted right outside. Running. Desperate. Frantic running. The floorboards shook with each heavy step. The hallway sensor lights flickered on off, stuttering like a dying breath. The person wasn't just running past. They were pacing right outside my door, getting faster and heavier with each pass. I buried my face in my pillow, covering my ears, but the sound pierced right through, vibrating in my bones. Then, just as suddenly, everything stopped. The hallway lights stayed on. The silence stretched for 3 painful seconds. A long, black shadow fell through the gap in the door, casting itself across my floor. Someone was standing right outside. I held my breath, completely frozen. And then I heard it click. A very small sound coming from inside my room, from the corner where Lily's desk was. I didn't dare to look, but some invisible force compelled me. Slowly, I lifted my head, my eyes straining in the dim light filtering in from the hallway. On her desk, where only my trophy had sat before, now lay a bright red high-heeled dance shoe. The very shoe she had cherished and practiced in for a month leading up to the audition. The ones I had accidentally knocked to the floor a few days before the exam. During our argument, I'd seen the small crack on the heel back then, but it stayed silent. And now, the broken piece of that, he lay right beside it, like an unspoken accusation. A shiver ran down my spine. Instinct screamed at me to turn back towards my bed. Someone was sitting at the foot of it, a figure with their back turned to me, long black hair covering their face. They were bent over as if tending to their feet. I watched as they slowly lifted one foot, then the other, slipping them into the red shoes. They stood up motionless as a statue for a moment. Then they took a step toward me. Lop. The intact heel hit the floor with a solid sound. The second step, ka! The broken heel struck the floor harshly. Lap. Kap. They were in my room, and they were approaching me. Alex, a dry, weary whisper came from the shadow. I knew that voice. Your dance is beautiful. But do you know what it feels like to dance on a broken heel? The figure lifted its foot. Lop. Click. The hallway light went out, plunging the room into total darkness. I couldn't see a thing. I could only hear "cop" and feel a cold breath brush against the back of my neck. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Stay safe out there.
The monsoon in Varanasi is a time of divine fury. The day my mother, Priya, died, it felt less like rain and more like the sky itself was weeping onto the ghats of the Ganges. I was only 8, a small boy lost in a white mourning outfit, too young to understand the finality of it all. But one image from that day is burned into my memory forever. My grandmother, Lakshmi, she stood as still and silent as a 1,000-year-old stone statue, her eyes dry and fixed on the sacred fire consuming my mother's body. There were no tears, only the sorrowful hiss of the flames. That night, our small house, tucked away in a damp, narrow alley, felt different. The air grew thick, heavy with the haunting scent of jasmine, my mother's favorite flower, mixed with the pungent, musty smell of river mud. It was a scent that clung to everything, a constant, suffocating reminder of what we had lost. In the nights that followed, her presence became more than just a scent. It started with sounds, a faint rustling behind the walls, like ghostly fingers scratching at the plaster, a clatter from the kitchen, as if someone was searching for my mother's comb in the dark. My grandmother dismissed it as rats, but her eyes would dart past me, staring into the empty space behind my back. Her lips pressed into a severe, dark line. She began to chant constantly, her whispers of Sanskrit mantras and the steady clack of her prayer beads becoming the new, anxious heartbeat of our home. It wasn't a sound of peace. It was the sound of a fragile wall being built against something that was already seeping through the cracks. Fear became my constant companion, a cold presence that crept into my dreams. I always felt watched, as if a pair of cold, wet eyes were fixed on me from some hidden corner. I'd catch fleeting glimpses in my periphery, a white figure gliding down the hallway, a pale face with deep, dark eyes flickering in the old mirror at the end of the room. But every time I'd spin around, there was only darkness, and always that thick, sweet scent of jasmine hanging in the damp air. My grandfather, once a stern but present figure, retreated into a stony silence. He'd spend hours on the wicker chair on the veranda, his cloudy eyes staring out into the ceaseless rain, a hookah burning slowly between his cracked lips. One night, over the drone of my grandmother's chanting and the drumming of the downpour, I heard his voice, trembling and broken. "Priya, my daughter, I am sorry. Forgive us." The next morning, he was gone. We found him collapsed in that same chair, his eyes wide open to the gray sky, the hookah long extinguished beside him. The old doctor called it a stroke. My grandmother remained silent, but during the final rites, I saw her hands tremble. The scent of jasmine in the house grew stronger, almost suffocating, as if a massive, invisible garland had been hung in every room. I couldn't bear it anymore. I had to know what was happening. I secretly went to see Guru Sharma, an old monk who lived in a small temple by the river. His eyes were so deep, it felt like he could see straight through the veil separating our world from the next. I told him everything: the sounds, the ghostly apparitions, the suffocating scent of jasmine. He listened patiently, his expression unchanging. He wasn't surprised. Without a word, he took a simple red thread, blessed it in a quiet ritual, and tied it around my wrist. "Your mother's soul, Rohan, is bound here," he whispered, his voice grave. "A curse holds her. And you must be cautious, even of your own family." The red thread gave me a sliver of courage, a fragile sense of peace. But it didn't last. That very night, I woke to a bone-chilling cold that had nothing to do with the monsoon drafts. When I opened my eyes, a woman in a stark white sari was standing at the foot of my bed. Her face was shrouded in shadow, but I knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that it was my mother. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine. I was frozen. A scream caught in my throat. She slowly began to raise a hand toward me, her fingers long, thin, and pale. Suddenly, the door to my room burst open. It was Lakshmi, my grandmother, her face a mask of fury. She brandished a wooden stick, shouting furious mantras into the darkness. In an instant, the white figure vanished like smoke. Lakshmi rushed to me, her eyes wild with a terrifying light. She gripped my shoulders, her sharp nails digging into my skin. "It's a demon," she hissed, her voice trembling with a strange mix of rage and panic. "It wants to take you. You must not tell anyone what you saw. Do you hear me?" Not a soul. Her raw panic confused me more than it scared me. I was no longer afraid of the apparition. I was curious. Why would she call my mother a demon? The next morning, I watched her from the shadows as she bustled around the kitchen. She was burning something in a small bronze censer, muttering ancient words I didn't understand as a pungent smoke filled the air. When I asked what she was doing, she jumped, startled, and quickly extinguished the embers. Her eyes, when they met mine, were cold and wary. "Just a cleansing ritual," she snapped. "Now go play somewhere else." But that night, my mother appeared again. This time, she was closer. I could see her face clearly, yet was pale, and her eyes were filled with a profound suffering. She didn't reach for me. Instead, she just stood there, silently shaking her head, her lips moving without a sound. Then, slowly, she raised her hand and pointed, not at me, but directly at Lakshmi's room. In that same instant, a blood-curdling scream of pure horror tore through the house. I scrambled out of bed and ran, my heart pounding. As I reached the hallway, Guru Sharma burst through the front door, his face pale and grim, as if he had been expecting this. Together, we forced open my grandmother's locked door. A strange, cloyingly sweet scent, different from the jasmine, hit us like a physical blow. Lakshmi was on the floor, motionless. Her eyes were rolled back in her head, her mouth frozen open in a silent scream. Beside her, the bronze censer was still smoldering, and on the wall, drawn in a dark red powder that looked like dried blood, were strange, unsettling symbols that radiated a chilling energy. Guru Sharma knelt and checked her pulse, then slowly shook his head. His voice was heavy with sorrow. "It's too late." She involved herself in a ritual she could not control. He pointed to the symbols on the wall. "This is a reversed Mrityunjaya mantra. It's not meant to liberate a soul, but to bind and destroy it." But the soul she was targeting was too strong, or perhaps too wronged. "Wronged," I whispered, trembling. "Your mother's soul did not return to harm you," Rohan said gently. "She came because she could not move on. Her death, it was not natural." I froze, the words echoing in the silent, incense-filled room. "Not natural." "No." Guru Sharma sighed, the weight of the tragedy heavy in his voice. "The person who caused her death, who used this dark magic to bind her soul to this house, was Lakshmi." The full, horrifying truth was revealed under the flickering light of an oil lamp. My grandmother, Lakshmi, had been consumed by a venomous jealousy. She hated my mother, a beautiful, gentle woman who had captured my grandfather's heart so completely. She believed Priya had used some kind of magic to bewitch him. When my mother became pregnant with me, that jealousy curdled into pure malice. On a stormy monsoon night, Lakshmi sought out a dark sorcerer and performed a curse, a vile ritual that caused my mother to die in childbirth, alone and in agony. But the ritual wasn't perfect. It failed to destroy Priya's spirit completely. Instead, it trapped her here, unable to find peace, unable to move on. My grandfather eventually discovered the truth, and the guilt, the torment, and the fear of what his wife had done literally broke his heart. Haunted by my mother's lingering presence, Lakshmi grew desperate. In a final, foolish act, she tried to use the same dark ritual again, hoping to banish Priya's soul for good. But the power she unleashed was too great, and it turned on her, sealing her own doom. Guru Sharma performed a grand overnight ceremony to finally free all three souls trapped in that house of sorrow. My grandfather, my grandmother, and my mother. As the first light of dawn broke over the Ganges, he told me they were finally at peace. He took me in, raising me as his disciple in the quiet sanctity of his temple. Years have passed. Life is now a peaceful rhythm of chants and incense. But every year, when the monsoon descends upon Varanasi and the river mist mingles with the damp air, I can still smell the faint, lingering scent of jasmine. In my dreams, I still see my mother's sad face. Her hand outstretched, she no longer points, but it feels as if she still has something to say. Another truth, not yet washed clean by the sacred river. The red thread on my wrist, now faded with time, sometimes gives a gentle, phantom tug. It's a haunting reminder that the line between the living and the dead, between love and hate, is never as clear as we think, and that some nightmares don't end. They just sleep, waiting for another stormy night in Varanasi to awaken. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, please consider liking and subscribing for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe. Safe.
The first thing that woke me wasn't knocking. It was a sound I still can't describe. Not exactly dragging, not quite scraping either. It was decay made audible, like something wet and heavy being pulled across the hallway carpet, leaving behind a cold, sticky trail that you could feel in your bones. This old apartment building in Chicago has always had its share of strange noises. The pipes moan like dying spirits, the floorboards creak under invisible feet, and the wind whispers through the cracks like voices from a forgotten time. But this sound, this was different. It felt alive. It felt like it knew I was listening. And then it stopped, precisely, unnervingly, right outside apartment 502, the one directly across from me, the one that's been empty for years. My name is Alex. I live in 501. I guess you could call me a modern hermit. I'm a freelance designer, which means my colleagues are pixels and my dinner is usually cold pizza. This floor, this apartment, is my sanctuary. The silence here is sacred. It's the only thing that numbs the memory of twisting metal, the smell of burning rubber, and the lifeless eyes of Lily, my sister. A car crash. A memory I've buried under layers of dust and denial, hoping it would just disappear. That rotten, dragging sound didn't come back that night. But the next morning, I saw them. A young couple moving into 502. Mark and Sarah. They didn't just look exhausted. They looked hunted. Sarah's pale face was hidden behind a little too much makeup, and her eyes never stayed still, darting around as if she was following something I couldn't see. Mark barely spoke, just offered a small, tired nod as we passed in the hall. Later, I ran into Sarah again. "We just need a quiet place," she told me, her voice barely a whisper. "Somewhere to start over." I nodded, trying to be a good neighbor, but my eyes lingered on the angry red scratches around her wrists, like she'd been desperately trying to peel something off her own skin. And there was a strange scent clinging to them, something I couldn't place, like dry grass mixed with gunpowder. It was unsettling. After they moved in, the silence I cherished was broken, not by footsteps or loud music, but by whispers, muffled arguments that bled through the thin walls. I'd hear Sarah crying late at night, a broken, desperate sound, and sometimes a slow, rhythmic tapping sound, like long fingernails gently knocking on glass. Then, one night, it came again. Not at my door, theirs. Knock, 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 knock. A rhythm so steady and unnatural, it felt ancient. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I crept to my door and peered through the peephole. The hallway light flickered, washing everything in this sickly yellow glow. And standing there, right outside 502, was a tall figure in a dark, hooded cloak. But it wasn't the cloak that made my breath catch in my throat. It was the hand. Long, bony fingers, dry, twisted, and bark-like, were tapping gently against the wood of their door. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. The knocking stopped. Then came that dragging sound again, wet, slow, fading away down the hall. The next morning, I saw Sarah by the elevators. She looked like a trapped bird, her eyes wide with terror. "Someone was knocking on your door last night," I said, my voice quiet. She froze. Her eyes went from scared to furious. No one was there. Don't lie," she hissed. "Sarah, I saw." "You saw nothing," she screamed, her voice echoing in the quiet hall. "It only comes when we think about it. Don't you understand? Just don't think about it." She slammed her door shut, leaving me standing there stunned. On the doorknob, I saw a streak of black, dried mud. A new smell began to spread through the hallway after that. It wasn't grass and gunpowder anymore. It was rot, a thick, cloying smell of damp earth, like a freshly dug grave. And when I passed their door later that day, I saw it. A black symbol painted across the wood. It was a chaotic mess of swirling, tangled lines that formed a kind of maze. It didn't feel like art. It felt like a warning. That night, the knocking came again. But this time, it was on my door. Knock, 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 knock. The same rhythm, the same chilling patience. I crept closer, my feet like lead, and forced myself to look through the peephole. It was there. The cloak, the hood, those withered, branch-like hands hanging loose at its sides. It wasn't knocking anymore. It was just listening. Then, slowly, so slowly, the hood turned, facing me directly. There was no face inside, just an abyss of pure darkness. But I knew, with absolute certainty, that it was staring straight back at me. I fell to the floor, my breath frozen in my lungs. When I finally dared to look again, it was gone. After that night, everything changed. My apartment, my sanctuary, became a prison. It was always freezing cold, no matter how high I turned the heat. Metal objects, doorknobs, my keys, even my forks, glistened with a thin, impossible layer of frost. At night, I started hearing breathing, a wet, heavy sound, right outside my door. And when I slept, I dreamed I was driving again. The same road, the same storm, only this time it wasn't a deer caught in my headlights. It was that tall, cloaked figure with those branch-like hands reaching out for me. Then came the night of the storm. A real storm this time. Thunder shook the entire building. Lightning tore open the sky, illuminating my room in blinding flashes. And in one of those flashes, I saw it, pressed flat against my window, 5 floors up. It wasn't human anymore. Its skin was rough and reptilian. Its limbs were far too long, and its body was stretched thin like smoke. It turned its head, and where a face should have been, there was only a hollow void. Endless, black, and hungry. I screamed. Another flash of lightning, and it was gone. But I heard a horrible screech of metal from across the hall, from the direction of 502. That symbol had kept it out before, but this thing, it could climb. I couldn't take it anymore. At dawn, I marched across the hall to confront them. The door to 502 was ajar. The stench that hit me was suffocating, thick, sweet, and rotten. "Mark? Sarah?" I called out, pushing the door open. Inside, everything was soaked. The furniture, the walls, even the ceiling dripped with a foul, black liquid. Black mud streaked the floor in grotesque patterns. And on the walls, surrounding that same chaotic symbol, were dozens, maybe hundreds of others, all scrawled in what looked like dried blood. Sarah sat in the corner, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes completely empty. Mark was muttering to himself, carving frantically into the wall with a knife. "They found us," he whispered, not even looking at me. "We ran, but it follows the scent. It follows fear." "What is it?" I asked, my voice trembling. Sarah finally lifted her head, tears streaking through the grime on her face. "It has no name," she said, her voice hollow. "The old man downstairs told us. It lives in painful memories. It feeds on grief. It fills your mind with voices, with illusions, anything to make you scared. Fear makes the meal richer." She looked at me with a chilling, hollow pity. "It's full of us now, and it smelled you." I ran. I sprinted back to my apartment, slammed the door, and pushed everything I could, my couch, my desk, my bookshelf, against it. That's when I finally understood. The symbol wasn't protection. It was a bargain. A desperate message to the creature: eat our pain. but spare our flesh. But when they ran out of pain, or maybe broke the deal, it needed new prey. And I was perfect. I was a banquet of guilt, a man haunted by his sister's death, by the nagging thought that maybe it really was my fault. That night, the entire building felt like it was holding its breath, trembling with a profound silence. And then it came. Not a knock, not a scratch, a voice, Lily's voice, but not from outside. It was right beside my ear. "Alex," it whispered, a sweet, chilling echo of my sister. "I'm so cold. Why did you leave me on that road?" I clutched my head, trying to block it out. "Stop it," I begged. "You were driving," it said sweetly, almost playfully. "You lived. Why you? Did you turn the wheel on purpose?" "No!" I screamed into the empty room. From the darkest corner, a shadow began to rise. It didn't need to open the door. My own fear had already invited it in. It was born from me. Dry, cracking branches reached out from the darkness, stretching toward me, breathing cold air and the scent of grave soil. I shut my eyes tight, trying to hold on to the last image I had of Lily's smile before the crash. But all I saw was darkness, and the brittle sound of breaking branches creeping closer, wrapping around me, draining every last drop of pain and guilt I had left. When morning came, everything was normal again. The smell was gone. The mud was gone. Apartment 502 across the hall stood empty, as if no one had ever lived there at all. And in my own apartment, everything looked exactly the same, except for me. I felt light, peaceful. The grief, the guilt that had been my constant companion for years, it was gone. Completely and utterly gone. For the first time in so long, I could actually breathe. Then I noticed it. Under my fingernail, a faint, tiny streak of black mud, and from deep within my mind, a voice, rough, ancient, and chillingly familiar, whispered one simple question. Who's next? In my village, we don't fear the dark. We fear what hides within it. We fear the things that slither during the monsoon nights, when the river Ganges growls like a starving beast. We fear the knocks that come at midnight, because we all know only the dead need permission to enter your home. And that night, it came. My uncle Rohan had returned after years away. He wasn't rich or proud, just broken, smelling of cheap liquor and a lifetime of regret. He arrived at dusk, just as the sky was bleeding red across the horizon, breaking the oldest and most sacred rule of our village. Never, ever walk alone after the last temple bell has rung. We were all sitting in our small mud house, under the trembling glow of a single oil lamp. The rain drummed a soft, relentless rhythm on the thatched roof. My grandfather, Dadaji, was praying in silence, the prayer beads slipping methodically through his thin, weathered fingers. Then, without warning, the door burst open. Rohan stumbled in, drenched and so pale he looked like a ghost. "Father," he gasped, his voice choked with terror. "Something followed me home." The entire room froze. The gentle hum of the evening was shattered. Dadaji didn't lift his head, but I saw the beads in his hand stop moving. "What did it look like?" he asked, his voice quiet, yet carrying a weight that filled the small space. "I don't know," Rohan stammered, his eyes wide with fear. "I didn't look back. I didn't dare. It was just a shadow and a smell, like jasmine flowers left to rot in the mud." Dadaji rose slowly, his old bones creaking. He walked to the doorway and stared out into the oppressive darkness beyond. "It's not a thing," he said, his voice grim. "It's a curse, and you've brought it to our doorstep." And then came the sound. It wasn't knocking, it was scratching. A wet, slow, deliberate sound, as if long nails were being dragged through soaked wood. Once, twice. Then an unnerving silence. Through the cracks in the door, the sickeningly sweet stench of rotten jasmine began to seep into the room. "It's come to collect a debt," Dadaji whispered, his face a mask of solemnity. "And we must pay." He turned to my mother, his command sharp and immediate. Kill the black rooster, but not by slitting its throat. Break its neck. Leave it whole on a banana leaf right outside the door. Light incense. And until that incense burns completely out, no one, absolutely no one, looks outside. My mother obeyed, her hands trembling as she took the rooster. The sharp, sickening crack of the bird's neck echoed through the silent house. Rohan collapsed in a corner, muttering frantic, desperate prayers. And I, just a boy of 7, hid my face in my mother's arms while Dadaji stood motionless by the door, chanting in a language I had never heard before, ancient and guttural. Outside, the scratching stopped. It was replaced by a different sound, a tearing, wet and bone deep. The gruesome noise lasted for exactly as long as the incense stick burned. The moment the last ember died, silence returned. The suffocating smell of jasmine faded, but it still lingered in the air, a phantom presence. But the night was not done with us. "It will return," Dadaji said, finally opening his eyes. They looked ancient, filled with a knowledge I couldn't comprehend. "Next time, it will want something closer." He turned his gaze, and it landed on me. "Aaron, you must go." "Go where?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "To the dry well near the fields. At the very bottom, there is an old wooden chest. Inside you will find a saffron-colored kurta, a child's shirt. You must bring it here." My heart froze solid in my chest. "But out there." "It will follow you," Dadaji interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "But it cannot touch you. Not as long as you obey the second rule. Do not speak, no matter what you hear, no matter what it says to you. Not a single word." He handed me a storm lamp. Its weak, flickering light quivered in my shaking hand as I unlatched the door and stepped outside. The air was heavy, cold, and thick with the smell of wet earth and decay. My small feet sank into the mud with every step. I could feel it, that presence behind me, silent but terrifyingly near. Then a whisper brushed against my ear, soft and filled with a deep, chilling sorrow. "Aaron." I clenched my jaw so hard it ached and forced myself to keep walking, one foot in front of the other. "Your grandfather lied to you," the voice said again, closer this time, coiling around me like smoke. "He sent you out here to die in my place. Just speak to me, little one, and I'll tell you the truth." I bit my lip until I tasted the warm, metallic tang of blood. The well finally appeared in the gloom, a dark, gaping mouth in the middle of the field. My hands trembling, I climbed down the crumbling stone wall, found the chest, and pried it open. Inside, just as he'd said, lay the saffron kurta, still damp to the touch. I grabbed it and scrambled back out, my breath coming in ragged, shaky gasps. On the walk back, the voice began to cry, a sound of a mother's grief, so hollow and endless it felt like it could swallow the world. "That shirt belonged to my son," it whispered, its voice breaking with anguish. "He was your age. He was pushed into this well. Your grandfather was there when it happened." Tears blurred my vision, but I kept walking, focusing only on the flickering light of the lamp and the safety of my home. I finally reached the house and stumbled inside. Dadaji immediately took the shirt from me, shut the door, and placed it on a brass tray. He lit a new stick of incense. The night fell silent again, a thick, waiting silence. When the smoke finally thinned, my Uncle Rohan lost what little control he had left. "Father, it wants me, doesn't it? Please, you have to save me," he wailed, his face streaked with tears and terror. Dadaji looked at him, his expression calm and chillingly cold. "Yes," he said, "a life for a life. Her son is gone and she needs a soul of equal weight, 68 kilograms. Rohan froze. His face went blank with a new kind of horror. That was his exact weight. Suddenly, the scratching returned, furious, desperate, splintering the wood of the door. "Hide in the grain chest," Dadaji barked at Rohan. "It's made of sacred wood. It can't reach you in there." Panicking, Rohan scrambled to obey. He climbed into the large chest. Dadaji placed the saffron kurta on top of the lid, then slammed it shut and locked it. Instantly, the scratching stopped. He turned to face us. In the flickering light of the lamp, his face looked as if it were carved from stone. "It never said it wanted someone who weighed 68 kilograms, he said softly, his voice barely a whisper. "It said it wanted the son of the man who killed her son." My mother gasped, a strangled, horrified sound. I felt my chest turn to a block of ice. "Years ago," Dadaji continued, his eyes distant, "when Rohan and I were just young men, there was a fight. A boy fell into the well. His mother, overcome with grief, hanged herself, and her tormented spirit became a pishacha, a demon, forever waiting for its revenge." He glanced toward the locked grain chest. "It doesn't want Rohan. It wants my son, your father, Arun, but he's long gone, so it will take what's closest." He turned his cold, hard gaze back to me. "It wants you." I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The terrible truth felt heavier than the night itself. "But the rules are the rules," he said, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "A soul can be traded if it enters the sacrifice willingly, and Rohan did." Outside, the first light of dawn began to creep across the fields. The stench of rotten jasmine was gone. The pishacha never returned to our home. It didn't have to. It had left something behind. A new kind of demon living inside our house. A demon with my grandfather's eyes. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales from the shadows. See you next time.
I never silence my phone anymore. Never. Even the slightest hum of the vibrate function on a wooden table makes me flinch. It all started 3 weeks ago at 3:14 a.m. during the most oppressive heat wave Chicago had ever endured. I posted it, just a fleeting thought, a single line tossed into the vast, uncaring digital void. I was sitting by my open window, but there was no breeze, just air so thick and sticky it felt like cough syrup. All I could hear was the distant, mournful screech of the I typed out, "Sometimes I think it would be easier if everything just stopped. Just ... 10 seconds later, a wave of instant regret washed over me. It was so maudlin, so embarrassingly dramatic. I deleted it. 10 seconds. That's all it was up for. I shut my phone off completely, feeling sweat prickle the back of my neck, and finally collapsed into a fitful, uneasy sleep. The next day, at 3:14 a.m. on the dot, my doorbell rang. Not the polite little beep of the modern intercom downstairs, but the jarring, old-fashioned brung from the buzzer right outside my apartment door. For B. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. My apartment was tucked away at the very end of the hall, in a creaky pre-war walk-up that always smelled faintly of boiled cabbage. No one ever visited me, especially not at 3 a.m. Brulang. It was longer this time, more insistent. I held my breath, sliding off the mattress. Despite the suffocating heat, the floor was weirdly cold under my bare feet. I crept through my living room, navigating around the empty boxers from a half-hearted cleaning attempt last week, and squinted through the peephole. Nothing. Just the empty, silent hall. The flickering fluorescent light cast a sickly, yellow pool on the stained, threadbare carpet. I was about to turn away, chalking it up to a prank or a wrong door, when Primera sa W Italiano. Placed neatly on my welcome mat was a bouquet of flowers, but they weren't roses or carnations, they were lilies. Big, waxy, white stargazer lilies, the kind you see at funerals. Their cloying, overly sweet scent was already seeping under the door, thick and suffocating, filling my small apartment. Tucked into the cellophane was a small, cream-colored card. My hand trembled as I unfastened the chain lock, opened the door just a crack, snaked my hand out, and snatched it inside. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I opened the card. There was just one word, written in precise, neat cursive. Don't. I slammed the door shut and threw all 3 deadbolts, my back pressed against the wood. Don't what? Don't stop. Don't think those thoughts. I stared at the lilies through the peephole until the sun came up, their smell seemingly poisoning the very air I was breathing. Life continued, but everything felt off. That initial tingle on the back of my neck, the feeling of being watched, had blossomed into a constant physical weight on my shoulders. I started hearing sounds I couldn't explain. The creak of the old oak floors when I was sitting perfectly still. A soft, metallic click, like a key testing the lock. Long after I'd bolted the door for the night, I tried to rationalize it. It's just an old building. Primera told myself, the pipes are settling. The heat is making the wood expand. About a week later, I was taking out the trash when I ran into Mrs. Petrov from apartment 4A. She was a tiny Romanian woman, perpetually dressed in black, who seemed to subsist entirely on weak tea and a healthy dose of suspicion. "Miss Chloe," she said, her dark eyes squinting at me, "you should tell your boyfriend to walk softer. The walls are very thin." I just blinked at her, confused. "My boyfriend, Mrs. Petrov. I don't have a boyfriend," she tutted, waving a dismissive hand. "Do not lie. I hear him every night, walking back and forth, pacing. She made a little walking motion with her gnarled fingers. "He seems worried for you. I hear him whispering through the plaster. It's okay. Everything will be okay. He's trying to help you sleep." The blood in my veins turned to ice water. That was it. That was the moment I decided I had to move. I told no one except my best friend, Jenna. I found a new apartment on the complete other side of the city, paid the deposit in cash, and scheduled the movers for the upcoming weekend. The old apartment was practically empty now. Just my mattress on the floor in a sea of dust bunnies. I decided I would sleep at Jenna's for my last night in the old neighborhood. It just felt safer. I was standing at the door, bag in hand, ready to leave for good, when I realized my mistake. My prescription? My anti-anxiety medication? I'd left the bottle on the bathroom sink. I needed it. There was no way I could sleep without it. Not tonight of all nights. I shot Jenna a quick text. "Forgot meds. Be right back," and was out the door before she could even reply, flagging down the first cab I saw. The cab ride took 7 minutes. 7 agonizing minutes. The building lobby was empty. silent except for the low hum of a broken vending machine. I took the rickety elevator up to the 4th floor. The hallway was deathly quiet. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to get the key into the lock. The apartment was pitch black inside. The echo of my own footsteps on the bare wooden floor sounded foreign and loud. The air was cold, stagnant, and held that familiar, cloying lily scent, even though I'd thrown them out weeks ago. I went straight to the bathroom, and there it was, the orange prescription bottle. A single spot of bright color in the gloom. I reached for it, my fingers just about to brush against the plastic when I froze. In the mirror's reflection, I saw it. The whole closet, the old built-in linen closet, was ajar. Just a crack. My voice was a stranglet whisper. Who's there? Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Then a tiny click. A metallic sound against wood. The closet door swung open. Slowly, silently. It wasn't a monster. It wasn't some shadowy specter. It was a man. A terrifyingly normal-looking man in a gray shirt and jeans. He was thin, with sunken, hollow eyes, and he was holding something my spare set of keys. The set I thought I'd lost at a coffee shop last month. He stepped out of the closet. But the closet was tiny, far too small for a man his size to hide in, unless it wasn't just a closet. You almost forgot this, he said. His voice was a low, dry rasp. He held up the orange prescription bottle. My hand was still outstretched, empty, reaching for the sink that was now suddenly behind me. I saw your post, he whispered, taking another step forward, blocking my only exit. The one you delete. 10 seconds. It was long enough. I saw how sad you were. It clicked. The closet backed onto the maintenance crawl space that ran between the walls of the apartments. He hadn't been hiding in the closet. He'd been living in the walls, listening to me cry, listening to me sleep, listening to every private moment. My sister, he continued, his eyes wide and unblinking. She was sad, just like you. She posted things like that, too. No one stopped her. No one really saw her. He was only a few feet away from me now. I could smell him, a musty, stomach-turning odor of plastered dust and old sweat. But I see you, Chloe, he said, his voice dropping even lower. I've been watching. You don't really want to stop. You're just scared. You just need to be kept safe. I wanted to raise the pepper spray clutched in my other hand, but my arm was frozen, heavy as lead. My throat was tight, all sound trapped inside me. He shook his head, a sickeningly sad smile touching his lips. You're not leaving. It's not safe out there for you. You'll just get sad and post again. You'll think those thoughts again. He reached into his pocket. Don't worry, he said, his voice now eerily soothing as he pulled out a roll of silver duct tape and a small syringe. I'm not going to let you hurt yourself. I'm going to keep you safe, right here, with me. Everything will be okay. Mrs. Petrov's words echoed in my head. Asterisk, he is trying to help you sleep. Asterisk, he stepped forward. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the empty apartment. absorbed by the bare walls, and I realized, with a final, sickening drop of my stomach, that my scream would go nowhere. He knew the acoustics of this building. He knew where the sound died. He had been here, in the dark, in the cold, just listening, waiting to save me.
They always come with hope. It's the finest spice, you see. The bell on the heavy wrought iron gate of my Haveli chimed. The sound was fragile, sharp, and utterly out of place in the suffocating air of Varanasi. Outside, the city was a roaring beast. Vehicles rattled, vendors shouted their wares, and ancient chants drifted up from the ghats along the sacred Ganges. But inside these ancient walls, time didn't flow. It stagnated. The air was thick with dust, the scent of withered marigolds and the metallic tang of old fear. It's a scent I've carried with me for decades, ever since the day I picked this very camera from a corpse and became a collector of souls. Hesitant footsteps echoed down the long marble corridor. Even her steps whispered of despair. I stood in the darkness of the main gallery, my hand gliding over a teak frame carved with intricate, almost obsessive precision. The photograph inside was icy cold to the touch. She appeared in the doorway, a trembling silhouette against the fading light. She was young, perhaps 20, wearing a faded kurta that had seen better days. Her name was Priya. I knew it before she even spoke. Mr. Rohan. Her voice cracked, fragile as a bird's wing. They say you can find the lost. I stepped from the shadows. I'm not a tall man, not a frightening one. My appearance is designed to be disarming. Lost is not a word I use, Priya, I said, my voice soft, a carefully practiced calm. I prefer preserved. A shiver ran through her. She held out a crumpled photograph, her hand shaking. It showed a young man smiling broadly, his eyes squinting against the sun. Arjun, my brother. He vanished 3 weeks ago. The police, they say he ran away. But I know better. He wouldn't. I can help you, I said, letting the words hang in the air. But my art, it comes at a price. It demands understanding. She didn't care. Hope blinds people, makes them reckless. It's the one constant in my work. Please, she whispered, her eyes pleading. I'll do anything. Good. A smile touched my lips, one I've rehearsed for years. It's meant to be reassuring, but there's a coldness to it I can't quite hide. Come, let me show you my gallery. We moved through shadowed courtyards where the air was thick with the smell of rot and sulfur. The silence here was heavy, not an absence of sound, but the pressing presence of something watching, waiting. We entered the main gallery. Flickering oil lamps cast twisted, dancing shadows on the peeling walls. My collection was all around us. Dozens of portraits, each in a lavish, ornate frame, each draped in black silk. What is this place? Priya asked, her voice a hushed whisper. These are my patrons, I said, my voice echoing slightly in the large chamber. Those who appreciate raw emotion. Not the fake smiles people wear for the world, but the primal moments that define them. I stopped at one frame, my fingers tracing its edge. For example, this one. I pulled away the silk veil. The photograph depicted a colonial-era room. At its center stood a British officer, his face flushed a deep crimson, eyes bulging with unrestrained fury, a whip raised high above his head. A single bead of sweat gleamed on his brow, frozen in time. Priya gasped and stepped back, her hand flying to her mouth. It's horrible. No, I corrected her softly. It is powerful. My guests, they consume it. Art is consumption, Priya. A transfer of energy. She didn't understand, of course, but the fear in her eyes was enough. It was a start. I led her deeper, toward the restricted section. The air grew colder here, a damp chill that settled in the bones. My patrons were gathered. Ancient, shriveled shapes crouched on dusty armchairs, beings drained of all feeling, now existing only to absorb the feelings of others, their collective gaze fixed on her as she entered. The air thickened, pressing in, squeezing the breath from her chest. "Arjun, where is my brother?" Priya's voice broke, the terror finally overwhelming her hope. I stopped before an empty frame, draped like all the others. He is a special piece, so full of vibrant energy. I took hold of the silk covering. My camera, you see, it doesn't just take a picture. It captures the soul at its absolute peak. For that officer, it was his arrogance. For others, it's greed or suffering. For your brother, I pulled the silk away. Priya screamed, a raw, piercing sound that was immediately swallowed by the suffocating silence of the gallery. There he was, Arjun, not smiling. He was trapped in the dark alley where I had cornered him. His eyes were wide with absolute, undiluted terror, his mouth open in a silent scream that would never end. The photograph wasn't static. It moved just slightly. A single drop of sweat slid slowly down his temple. His fingers curled, trembling against the grimy brick wall. No. Priya lunged forward, her fists pounding against the glass. But it wasn't glass. It was soft, yielding, like skin. "Arjun! Arjun!" "He can hear you," I whispered, leaning in close. "But he cannot reply. His fear fills this room. It's a symphony. My patrons love it." From the shadowy corners of the room came a dry, rustling sound, like thousands of insects clapping their brittle wings in appreciation. "Release him!" Priya shouted, tears streaming down her face, her voice raw with anguish. "I am an artist," I said, my tone matter-of-fact, "and this is my masterpiece. Souls are an endless resource, Priya. I'll pay you. Any price, just let him go," she begged. I shook my head slowly. Money is meaningless here. My patrons demand balance. There must be an exchange. I stepped closer to her, my camera already in my hand. The lens began to hum with a low, hungry energy. This gallery requires a trade, one soul for another. Priya froze. Her eyes darted from my face to her brother's trembling, terrified portrait. "You mean me?" "Not just you," I clarified. "The moment. My patrons are growing bored of Arjun's simple fear. They crave something new, something more complex." I raised the camera. "I want your sacrifice," I whispered. "The moment you realize you must die to save your brother. That terror, that pain, but above all, the love, that pure, painful, self-destructive love, that will be my new masterpiece." She took a deep, shuddering breath. The tears stopped. She stood tall, her fear replaced by a terrifying resolve. "Do it," she said, her voice firm and clear. "But you promise me. You release him." I pressed the button. There was no snap, no flash. Only a cold wind that surged from the lens, tearing at the very air in the room. The color drained from Priya's face, her skin turning to ash. The warmth, the motion, the life, all of it was gone in an instant. Her eyes remained locked on me. A perfect, eternal crystallization of love, acceptance, and soul-shattering terror. Her body collapsed to the floor, a hollow, gray shell. A collective sigh rose from the patrons, a sound of deep satisfaction. Sated, they withdrew back into their shadows. I walked to Arjun's portrait. The surface, once soft as skin, was now hard and cold as glass. His image trembled, flickered, and then vanished, leaving only a pane of absolute black. Arjun fell from the frame, hitting the marble floor with a dull thud, coughing and gasping for air. He was gaunt, his eyes hollow. He saw the gray shell that was once his sister. "Priya!" He crawled towards her. "Priya, what happened?" "An exchange occurred," I said calmly. "Your sister bought your freedom. Go. You are free." I gestured toward the dim light of the corridor. Arjun stared at me, then at her body, then at the new portrait on the wall, where Priya's eyes watched him with eternal, loving horror. He screamed, a broken, wretched sound, and scrambled to his feet. He ran. He fled through the marble corridor, the stench of the Haveli clinging to him. He shoved the iron gate, its bell ringing wildly, frantically. He fell into the alley, into the blinding sun. He fell into the alley, into the blinding sun. The noise of the city surged back, the blare of rickshaws, the distant chanting, the shouts of vendors. The real world. He was free, but the real world was now a trap. Every sight and sound a reminder of the price that was paid. A puddle reflected his gaunt, panicked face. He looked up and saw a billboard advertising soap, a woman smiling down. Her eyes morphed into Priya's frozen, sacrificial gaze. Arjun screamed again and ran, staggering through the crowded streets. He was free, but forever burdened by sacrifice he could never repay. I returned to my collection, stepping past Priya's empty form. I stood before my new masterpiece. Her portrait gleamed with a terrible beauty, an emotion so pure it would satisfy my patrons for decades. I stopped at the empty black frame where Arjun had escaped. He was free, yes. As I said, I am merely a debt collector. I pressed my ear against the cold, black pane. From its depths, I could hear faint whispers, the echo of a soul torn in two. A part of him I had kept, a fragment of his fear left behind. Priya. It's so dark. Priya. I smiled. My collection is magnificent. But eventually, the patrons will hunger again. They are always hungry. And I, their artist, their curator, I am merely another prisoner in this gallery with a slightly longer chain.